Okay, guys, welcome to Wot Supp Podcast. This is episode, I believe it's 3 now that we're up to. Beautiful. Stu has just given us the flawless banner there. We've got ourselves Stu Shannon, owner and operator of Universal Supplements. He was one of the OGs behind this podcast here. And we also have Greg Haglund from Switch Nutrition, which is an awesome thing to have along as a guest. Thanks for joining us, mate. This is really great.
Welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, so we started this around Christmas time, particularly when the TGA was starting to put some closer insight into the supplement industry and regulation, and we've since sort of let it morph into a bit of a place where we're all it's sort of a state of the nation for the supplement industry per se. We're getting different guests on, and we're sort of more just talking now in general, letting this be a platform for people in the supplement industry to actually talk and just actually just discuss things in the industry, where it's changing, trends, products. We can really geek out too if we'd like, but yeah, it's a nice little space, I think. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Stu to do his usual.
That's it. I think that it was, like you said, the idea was a lot of people don't know what's going on in the supplement industry, and people are interested in this stuff. So, hey, let's make a podcast about it. So Wot Supp was born. But yeah, here we are. I guess since our last meeting, there's been a lot going on. Obviously, everyone's locked in their homes at the moment. Hence, we're meeting on a Zoom meeting. I'm looking like I'm coming to you from a computer that was built in about 1998, which is not far off. I think this one's from the early 2000s. So apologize for my image quality, but I do have a Rode mic on. So you should be hearing me quite clearly, which is nice.
Yeah, the audio.
Oh, great sound. Fantastic sound. You've never sounded so good. Great.
Yeah, so Greg, how you been, mate? What's been happening in your life? What's going on with Switch?
Well, a lot going on at the moment, and a lot going on for a lot of people, I think, just given the change in the world as it stands, and whether you agree with what's going on or whether we agree with the conditions that we're all being forced into. Regardless, we have to accept it, and I guess we have to do what's within our own control. As a company, we've made some choices and decisions to try and keep our staff on the roster and within a job, which is obviously something that we take very seriously, because we much love our staff and our team, who have really helped us develop over the last 12 to 24 months. As a brand, we're coming up on 3 years in the industry, which isn't really that old, and we had some pretty big goals for 2020. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, 2019 was a shit. Let's go 2020." And that wasn't the case for us, but we were certainly excited about this year. Not that we're any less excited, but it's certainly not going to be the year that I think everyone thought it was going to be. So we've adapted and we've adjusted, and we've benefited in some areas. Ideally, Adrenal switch, and not because we want to, but a lot of people are stressed out there. So that product's taken off for us. Vitality switch, because people are looking after their health. So I think we're going to see a bit of a transition, Stu, and we'll perhaps not away entirely, but at the moment, certainly away from the pre-workout and fat burner category a little bit, certainly into the more health and wellness space. We've sort of been a beneficiary of that by default because of the product range we have. Dare say that will shift back when gyms open back up. Which I know, Stu, you've been a big proponent for. So,
See, I think that I don't think we'll see the shift back personally. I think we're going to see a change in people's behaviours and people's buying habits forever. I think that this has probably been the wake-up call that some people needed as far as their health goes. And it is a time when people are focused on health, obviously being the fact that there's this virus that's shocked the world and thrown us into this situation. People are more health conscious now. They're thinking about their bodies. What's going on inside me? What's my immune system doing? Are my natural defenses up? These are questions that most people probably have never asked themselves before. So I think it's an interesting time. And I think personally, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of people in the industry, and there's a lot of predictions that we're going to see. Like, obviously it's a quiet time in supplements at the moment because the gyms are closed. Foot traffic is down for obvious reasons. But I think once we see the gyms reopen, people will be very eager to get back into their regimes and regimens. And you know, there's a tip that we're going to see a big boom in the supplement industry once the gyms reopen.
I agree. I agree with that one, Stu. And I think I agree with Greg's earlier one, where we've seen a bit of a change in the marketplace. We, for example, as a business, you know, protein used to be, say, 20 to 30% tops of our business. Last month it was 50%. And Metabolize, a product that's always been general health focused and well-being focused, that went from being a complete back, you know, sort of one of the guys in the bench warmers to front and center. And it's reflective of the marketplace. Yeah, like you said, Stu, like people are really looking at what's, you know, general health now, and it's a lot of people who have needed a wake up call for a while. It might have been 5-10 years since they've been active, and a lot of, you know, the government's finally putting out messages saying, you know, walk more, exercise more, get moving, stop drinking alcohol, stop smoking, eat more fruit and veg. Like, they thought at the start this was all COVID specific sort of advice, but it just happened to be ways to be healthy and ergo function as a human, and it's flown on beautifully to sort of them coming into the space that we happen to occupy, and we can hopefully give them some useful advice with stuff like we're doing tonight, but also products to help as well. So yeah, I think that'll probably be a lasting change. Maybe not permanent, but it's definitely, like, you know, like you said, the pre's, the fat burners, those sort of things we're definitely seeing a transition more towards your super greens, your glutamines, your gut health products, food sources with your proteins and such. It's quite remarkable to see such a 180 overnight, actually, as an industry. You don't normally see that, you know, in many people's lifetimes, a complete polar shift. But it's really cool to be part of. I think it's really quite interesting what's happening at the moment in the industry. So, yeah, it's quite fascinating, really.
I think, just leading on from that, like, we say that, hey, these are habitual changes. People change their routine, and, you know, we're hoping that they'll stick with it. The truth is that habits take a long time to form, good and bad. So, you know, I think we'd be kidding ourselves that if we drop these restrictions, that people will just, you know, continue on with all the good habits they've accumulated over the last, you know, month to 2 months potentially. I think it's going to take longer than that. But I do think it is a wake-up call. I agree with that. I think that you know, we're still going to have to continue to keep the education going, continue to keep the, you know, the product development going, and continue to keep giving people a reason. And what a lot of pushback we get, obviously, and you guys would have experienced this, is, you know, with a greens product like Vitality Switch, for example, that has 33 whole food ingredients, I get people going, I don't need that. I eat plenty of leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables, or you know, I'm good with my veggies. I've got veggies in every meal. And, you know, the argument I have with a lot of people is that the food system's just not providing what it used to. You know, if you go back to our fathers or our grandfathers, probably is a step further that we need to take. You know, there's a meme that goes around, which I laugh at quite regularly, that says, you know, our great-grandparents used to call organic food. You know, it wasn't called organic, it was just called food. And now, you know, all the food we're getting from the supermarkets is often picked early, gas ripened, cold storage, you know, transported around the country, in some cases into country transportation. You've got pesticides and toxins and sprays all over them, which is, you know, killing bugs. And the idea of anything that on our food that kills bugs then goes into killing the gut bugs as well, or the microbiome. So the health issues that we're seeing, in my view, is a trickle-on effect of the way we've treated our bodies for such a long time. And that's not intentional. That's not by no means people just going out of their way to go, you know, I'm going to find the shittiest, crappiest food and which has the most toxins and pesticides, etc. They're just going to their supermarket or going to their farmers market and not asking the right questions. And I think the wake-up call is around, you know, what are the right questions to be asking? What are the things I need to be mindful of? And, you know, that's the stuff I want to teach people. I want them to go, okay, what is the difference between grass-fed meat and grain-fed meat? And how will that impact my health? And why should I be looking for that? Because those sorts of things do have that flow-on effect, and supplements will certainly make up the difference. And obviously, that's why they're called supplements and not replacements. They're there to supplement a healthy diet. They're not there to replace fruits and veggies. But the fruits and vegetables we eat today are not what our grandfathers and grandmothers had. And, you know, our toxins and our stress that we have today is probably much higher than they had also. So, you know, there's a bit of a disconnect.
So just reaffirming that as well, what Greg was saying about fruit and veg, especially not being the same as it was years ago. A lot of people don't know this, but my background is actually in horticulture. So the very first trade that I did was landscaping, in which you become a qualified horticulturalist. And this is something that we study in horticulture, and it's really, really interesting. You in order to grow a vegetable, for example, you don't need a lot of things. You need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We can literally grow a tomato in a gel using only nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. All right, so that's really all that you're going to find in there. You grow it in a soil that's really, really high in a diverse range of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all this sort of thing. They're all coming through the fruit, through the vegetable, and you're then taking them into your system. But the problem with farming now is that's all we do is we take the vegetable out of the soil, and the soil's pilfered of all those important minerals and nutrients. And then what do? We just put nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium back in. That's all we put back into the soil. We repeat the process over and over and over and over again for 20, 30, 40 years until the soil where you're growing that same crop that you were growing in the 1950s, there's nothing left in it but nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that same tomato was once filled with stacks and stacks of different minerals and nutrients, and now it's just got 3. Or low amounts of the others. You know, there's obviously it comes from other sources, some in the water and whatnot.
I heard a very good analogy with this one. Actually, there was a colleague of mine. His sort of associate of his was doing a uni experiment, and they were testing these students how to test for vitamin C in fruits, and they encouraged the students to all go out to a supermarket and purchase navel oranges and test them. And they all got their standardized results, etc., and it all fell within a rough range of the class and all that. But this particular student, returned that had gone and actually just picked one from their tree at home and tested it. And the results came back in. It literally wouldn't register. It was so high in comparison to the rest of it. Didn't fit within the bell curve to the rest of those that had been tested. And it was they actually, to the point where the teacher had said, no, you're wrong. Like you've done the test wrong. Like what did you do here? There was an error. It's like no, it was just something that was just literally grown the way it should versus something that was broad acre farmed, industrially farmed. Obviously, look at the vitamin yield. It was just apples and oranges. Excuse the pun, but. In that particular case, it was quite like it literally in their minds broke the test. The difference between just the backyard fruit tree and the actual broad acre farmed ones you'll see at a supermarket after 3 months in cold storage, as Greg alluded to. And that 9-day difference is what we see in the supplement end. We've all had a bit of a dabble in manufacturing, and you can say the same for herbs. You can say the same for botanicals. And that's what in the end makes the big difference, I think, to the quality that we bring as a party. The supp industry sort of really put a focus on that in the last 2 to 3 years, I'd say, guys. Where it's been when proprietary blends got removed and everyone started really focusing on first off what was in a formula and then what's good about what you put in that formula. That's when it really switched from people just not really caring too much. Now people are really focused on the quality of what's going into each product, and I'm seeing that shift. Certainly, people really that's a big sell point now in the industry, and a certain big focal point. Have you guys seen that shift too?
Well, did you say proprietary blends got removed? I must have missed the memo on that one, because I'm still seeing a ton of them, mate. Obviously, Primavolics doesn't have proprietary blends, neither does Switch Nutrition, but there is a ton of them still, and still some from Australian brands, and it devastates me to see this. And they use the excuse, we're hiding our secret sauce because we don't want to be copied. Truth is, you formulate, Stu formulates, I formulate. If you know what you're doing with formulas, you don't need to copy. In many cases, you're better off to reinvent the wheel a little bit and improve upon it rather than just mimic what's already out there. So, there is no need for these proprietary blends, and all they're doing is hiding the actual information from the consumer, and it irritates me, it frustrates me, and I can't imagine how frustrated consumers must be, because they're looking for a formula, and if you were to go and Google any of the ingredients, you need to know what levels you're going to be using.
Yeah.
And look, not always are those levels exactly right, and I'll give you an example of this. So if you were to Google L-theanine, most of the research on L-theanine is between 200 and 500 milligrams. That's the effective dose range. And what we try to do with Switch is try and put in the lowest effective dose so that people can titrate up to their preferred level. And when we were formulating Adrenal Switch, we put in 200 milligrams of L-theanine into that formula. Now, the thing about L-theanine is it's a calming energy type of amino acid. So it doesn't entirely make you, just really calm. For some people, it can actually, give them a little bit of energy from it. So at 200 milligrams, people that were using Adrenal Switch in our prototypes before we went to market, I would say 7 out of 10 had a great night's sleep, but 30% of them said, I was wide awake for at least an hour before I really dozed off. So it wasn't ideal. What we did is we dialed that back to 100 milligrams, and we came under criticism from people who are looking at the research and go, hang on a minute, the effective level is 200 to 500. And I've said, well, yeah, you're right, but hang on a minute, it didn't work. And this synergy and at this timing, so we use 200 milligrams in power switch, we use 200 milligrams in L-theanine when we're trying to take the edge off the caffeine and provide that calmer energy effect at that time. But when we're using it in adrenal switch, we only use 100 milligrams because that's what works. Still open label, but it gives people an opportunity to understand why. And we're happy to have those conversations. Whereas if you don't know how much is in there at all, well, you can't even start to have those conversations.
Yeah, God, yeah, and especially what you can do when you play around with standardizations and you work with botanicals, Greg, is when you're looking at a well standardized version, like your withanias and rhodiolas and so on. Like withanias are typically 5% with analoids, and you've got 95% additional herb to play with. So when you label that, you can make that look very different. Everyone's seen on the back of the old school test boosters, it'll be equivalent to 4 grams of tribulus, say, and then you look at the actual saponins.
Yeah.
And it's really, and that's a really good point. And same with the theanine thing. I had that when I was making Warfare Rips the first time. I put in the higher range, and it was too stimulatory. I put it down to 50 megs, and I came under criticism as well, saying, you're underdosing, why aren't you using, and it's not an expensive amino acid. I'm like, this isn't a cost saving measure. Like, it just does what I need it to do in the formula at 50. At 200, it just absolutely smoked people.
That's something I want to add to that. That's something that I think people who aren't formulating will struggle to get their head around. So we have this issue where people will look at every individual ingredient in a product, and they want to see each ingredient at the maximum end of the therapeutic dose range. But when we're formulating, that's not always a fantastic idea. So if you look at something like Adrenal Switch, or you look at something like Cortidrine, for example, a lot of the products all have an effect on similar parts of our system or similar parts of our body. So for example, GABA receptors. So if you've got 3 or 4 ingredients that are all affecting your GABA receptors, you don't want them all at maximum dosage. So we have, we have maximum, we have minimum, but then we have kind of the ideal range. And sometimes when you have that cumulative effect of 3 or 4 ingredients, putting the absolute maximum therapeutic dosage does not make the best product. Okay. Another great example is stimulants. We stack 3 or 4 stimulants together, and you put them all at maximum dosage, you just want to vomit. It just makes you chuck up, you start getting jittery, you shake, your skin turns gray. It's not a pleasant scenario, but we put things when we're formulating, we're trying to give the end consumer the best impact we can from the product. We want to create an ideal, perfect situation for them. And that's why formulating a product, it's not done by sitting in front of a screen looking at Google and just searching, what are the best ingredients for whatever and throwing them together. The product doesn't work. No. If you've ever tried doing that, it does not work. Like if you ever look at my botanicals cupboard at home and my amino acids cupboard, I've got 50 to 100 different compounds at home in 100-gram sachets, and I work with them. I try the products. I try and make things that work, and that's how I formulate, and that's why we end up with products that are fantastic, that people love, and that once they've tried it once, they're going to come back and they're going to try it again. It's not thrown together by Googling what are the best ingredients.
I'm really glad you read there with stims. Sorry, Greg. Actually, mate, shoot on.
So I was just saying, and I think that's what sort of sets the 3 brands apart from many of the others in the market, is number 1, Aussie made, Aussie tested. We test them on ourselves as much as we do our friends and family and athletes before they come to market. I know that we've done that. I know you guys are very careful with all of that. So you're formulating to what you think will work, and then obviously you make the adjustments according to the feedback you get before you go to market. There's not been a single product that we've brought to market that we haven't tested. I mean, Protein Switch recently, it's not one you have to test efficacy because protein's there to help repair cells. It's not something you feel immediately, but it's in our case, because we're going into that plant protein space. What are the 2 things we need to overcome for plant protein? It's digestibility and it's taste and texture. So what we were doing and working on for the last 2 years, I personally had a third thing that was critically important for me, which was making sure the amino acid profile it was bioavailable, that we would use it effectively. So, yes, there's 2 other parts to it that matter to me and Switch, but the most important thing to the consumer is it tastes good and it doesn't bloat them, make them feel rubbish. So in order to do that, we had to find proteins that would digest, and that meant getting sprouted seeded proteins and legumes and grains combined to provide the best amino acid profile. We left rice out of the equation because rice has a tendency to be incredibly gritty and grainy. And it also has a heavy metal contamination issue worldwide. The way rice is grown in water, it's a virtual sponge for heavy metals and arsenic, and that gets more concentrated when you get into protein. So we were cognizant of all of these different things as we're formulating to make sure that we're providing a product that's going to be helpful, not harmful. It's going to taste great. It's going to be as low grit or grit free as possible. Now, to be completely honest with you, I felt like we'd achieved this probably 6 months ago, but I'm not as fussy as some others within our business and within our circle or our bubble. And Kath, who is in our office in particular, she would come in and she would try the little sample shots, little 50 ml cups, have a drink of it, maybe drink the whole thing, maybe not. And she'd go, yeah, look, that's great. Sorry, what's going on? The meeting has been upgraded.
I think we just got a free increase on the time span.
Yeah. And so, but she wouldn't finish the whole thing sometimes, and she certainly wouldn't grab the shaker and drink the whole lot. And it was only when that started to happen, that I knew that, okay, we've made it. We've gotten to a point where this is going to taste good. It's going to hit the market, because she's a whey drinker, but she's that whey drinker that will complain to you about how it bloats her and makes her feel rubbish. And then when she used the plant-based protein that we were formulating, the taste and texture was so good she couldn't put it down. So I think having those sorts of plans, and strategies for your business when you're formulating is absolutely critical and can't be overestimated in terms of its need to a business. And I know that you guys follow the same sort of strategy.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I know you're the same, Will. Like when I'm looking at formulating a product, it's, people say to me, well, you should release this, you should release that. The process takes me at least 6 months, from start to finish to get a product that's ready to even, put to a contract manufacturer. It's a 6-month process minimum. I've released a product a year for the last 4 years. So, that's how long it takes me to get what I feel is the best possible product that I can deliver to the market. And that's always what I'm looking for. If I don't believe that I've developed what, in my opinion, is the best product in its category, I don't put it out there. And I know you're the same way, Greg. And one thing actually I wanted to just quickly rewind to that you were saying before about the proprietary blends, and you were saying, people say that it's to hide their secret formulas and all that. I think it's probably interesting that that came from you, considering you're probably one of the most copied brands on the market. If you look at Switch Nutrition, when it started, the Adrenal space was almost non-existent. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't something that you stocked. Like, I'd been in the supplement industry many years before that. We didn't have a section in our store for, for adrenal supplements and for anti-cortisol supplements.
No, that's pretty recent. That was actually really quite a very new space. I'm glad it's finally here. That's sort of the niche that, I found a lot of us are in that space. Greg in particular, you've done some good work in the education around that game, and it's God, I'm so glad it's here. Hey, like the difference that makes people's health and well-being, which is what I think most of our brands are aiming to do, is that, like, all three of us have launched into the space, and all three of us have got adrenal products for that reason, and they're all used in varying capacities. Greg, yours, hilariously enough, was actually used the wrong way, but ended up being most famous for it. As a sleep formula versus the post-workout intended. Mine, I'm just going whole hog for a sleep formula, because I think that's pretty much where everyone's stressed people want sleep, is that where I sort of figured. But I'm really glad you went down the stimulant pathway, Stu, because that's really, that's the perfect example of where, on paper, something sounds fantastic. You throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and then when you get the first beta sample on it, you want to die. It is really that bad. Like, and especially when you look at release times, that's something you just have to try. Like, when you look at, if you've got 3, 4, 5 different stimulants, everyone's only reading the caffeine on the label now. But is that synthetic caffeine? Is that natural caffeine? Is it citrate, anhydrous, dicafmalate? Is it, we can green coffee bean. We've got some florogenic acids, some theanine naturally occurring.
And then we've got absorption. Then we've got absorption agents like piperine, and like everything has an effect on each ingredient in there. So it's like,
crazy. Isn't it?
At some point in time, you have to drink the thing.
Yeah, you did, right. Absolutely. And, we're also conscious of what's going on in the gene space too. I don't know if you guys are sort of keeping up with all of that and the different single nucleotide polymorphisms that people have, heterozygous, homozygous, looking at MTHFR genes and methylation and glucuronidation and all the different detox pathways that people use and can have, problems with. So one of those most common being MTHFR, which is a gene which helps us to methylate and use B vitamins in the body. Now, if you have a heterozygous or homozygous SNP of that gene, you are not capable of using those B vitamins effectively or efficiently. So what we do with our product is make sure that we use the methylated version so that we're using the form that every single human being on the planet is capable of using, not just 50% of the people that use the product. And it's that attention to detail, it's sort of the difference that makes a difference, I guess, when you're looking down at those ingredients, and they actually play a really big role in the way that those caffeines and stimulants are metabolized in the body, the way they feel, the way they function, can come down to those little amounts of B vitamins and where they're coming from and what doses they're at.
Definitely, and you pass on methylation, conjugation, acetylation, all of your phase 1 and phase 2s, and the really fascinating bit of data, like the research I was listening to recently on stimulants and caffeine metabolism as a whole, shows how crucial your phase 1 detox pathways are for stimulants and their efficacy in the body and how they're actually treated. And people who are those hyper responders, those people who have a cup of coffee and they can't sleep for 8 hours, that's quite often an issue with that first phase, your cytochrome P450s. And it just shows so much how, little things that like the minutiae is really what can affect people massively. You can go from being someone who can, handle caffeine fine, get increased cognition and performance, or someone who has a cup of coffees and an anxious wreck for 8 hours. And it can be something as simple as, your, cytochrome P302 enzyme is not getting the resources it needs to function and sort of do its metabolic activity. So it's really quite fascinating the amount that goes into something as basic as how putting caffeine in. Like that's stimulants are the.
And it's so funny too though when you do have a product and you guys are factoring in all this sort of thing, and then you get the end consumer and they look at the product, they take the product and they come back and they say something like, "Oh, the product sucks, did nothing." And you're like, you get another person who's coming in and they're like, "Oh man, that thing was too much for me," and you're like, all right, everyone's body's going to respond differently to these things. It's like we're trying to cater to every single person. And at the end of the day, humans are not all created equal. We respond to things differently. Like Greg said, it's how our genes are. What does our genetic makeup say? How is our body going to respond to this stuff? And you can't please every customer every time. That's something I've learned at this point. Can I ask something? I know you don't have too much longer with us, Greg, but something, actually, I better put this on for this.
Oh, we love the foil hat. We love it.
I know that Greg's stance on
you look like a priest.
the COVID lockdown is an interesting one, and it's maybe not the stance that everyone in the public has. So I'd be interested just to have a quick chat about all of our stances on the COVID lockdown situation.
You want me to go first?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh man, how much time have you got? Look, to be honest, I've been across this because I'm trying to, understand the reaction, that the governments around the world are having to this, and I feel like there may be some sinister sort of information being sort of sent out to governments from the Gateses and the Faucis of the world. But beyond that, I think we just need to look at the facts that we're presented with now. And I think governments need to take a quick look at the model that was created in the beginning versus the modelling that's now being shown out of LA. Stanford just did a study where they looked at the antibodies of a population study, so that epidemiologically they took a large cross section, and they found that the values or the amount of people that were allegedly had COVID-19 was significantly lower. In fact, between 50 to 80% lower than what they first thought, which means that the death rate becomes 50 to 80% less as a fraction. So instead of saying, 3% of people are dying from this, the numbers are closer to 0.1 to 0.2% of people that actually get the virus are likely to end up in ICU or dead, right? Which is not great. We don't want anyone to die. So I don't want to sort of underestimate this sort of situation, but I guess the reaction to something like that versus the reaction to the seasonal flu, or the reaction to diabetes, or the reaction to cancer from cigarette smoking, or the reaction to deaths behind the wheel of a car. We don't seem to get upset about those things, and we're not banning cars, cigarettes, alcohol, and all these other things that are leading to these deaths. So I don't know now why every single person that's on board with this lockdown and isolation and, we need to flatten the curve, that's been done. And look, maybe if we hadn't done that, there might have been a lot more deaths. Who's to say? Certainly know that the hospitals haven't been overrun in this country. So, is that to say the modelling was wrong? Probably. But, we're stuck with what we've got. And, as far as opinions go, my opinion is that it's just unfortunate it unfolded the way it did. It's unfortunate for mum and pop, business owner. Maybe it's fortunate for the surfer that didn't really care too much for their job and they're getting a heap of good waves. But for the average punter who's trying to provide for their family and live their life and grow their business, this is not a great situation for the economy, and it's going to be something that our children and children's children are going to pay for generations to come, unfortunately.
Like, I mean, obviously, my stance on it is, at the end of the day, I choose to believe that that I choose to trust what I'm told by my government because I have to live in it. So, for me, I choose to accept what I'm told, and I choose to abide by what I'm told. Personally, I can't see really anything that could ever be a justification for the impact that we're having on the economy right now. It's just like insanity. Like, I mean, even for my business alone, like I've seen 60 to 80% drop in my in-store sales, which is huge. It's crippling, and I'm lucky that I manage cash flow quite well. But if I was running my business week to week, I would be closed up by now. It would not be possible. And so for me, I'm kind of looking at at Sweden's model right now, and I'm sort of starting to question whether or not it was the right decision for us. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, we don't have that power, do we? We can't sort of do too much. And I think really
people to make those decisions, and I think you're right. I mean, herd immunity is definitely the way forward and should have been the way from the beginning, which is what Sweden's doing. But the only downside, I guess, is that you're going to see an increased death toll. But the people that were dying, and again, I want to be cognizant of the fact that this could be my loved one, your loved one, or anyone's that dies from a virus or any sort of, could be the cold and flu virus or seasonal flu virus. So, it's not to take away from those lives, they matter, but the point is that most of the people had a comorbidity that have died. They were very, very old and or very sick. So, it's just one of those ones. I wish we'd done it a little differently, but you're right. We just have to trust what we're being told, and
where do you stand, Will?
Well, I'm going to come in with a bit of a positive. I'm going to come in with a positive on this one because I'm about to do
He's the diplomatic one.
I guess I am, in that I've got a more. I care less about having an opinion on political matters anymore, because I guess it doesn't. I've noticed that it doesn't really matter anymore. I just stay in my own lane. But what I have found really, really fascinating about this is that the people who, like, it's sort of narrowing out in the industry as a whole, the good operators from the not so good, and people, they're like, the speed at which people have pivoted because of this is incredible. Like, I've never seen, the way that our industry has responded has been really quite awesome. We got a glimpse of that when it was all threatened by the TGA last year, and we got a lot of people, like the people on this podcast right now, banding together under the Save Aussie Supps movement and really getting working together. And then this time around, we've sort of seen, like, basically it's just highlighted the people who are good operators, how fast, how adaptable they are, how quickly they've completely changed operations entirely. They've gone from purely bricks and mortar to doing home, free home deliveries. They're literally, they'll do their full, day in store. A lot of them had to lay off staff. Like, I just closed my retail operation, and we're laying off staff, and people are personally driving and delivering their supplements to people, like dropping it door to door. It's incredible, really. Like, it's sort of like a complete reset button too for a lot of businesses who are carrying a lot of overheads that they may not need to, but weren't looking at too closely because they were just stuck in the daily grind. We certainly have benefited from a bit of time for introspection on what is sensible expenditure-wise to have and keep. And I don't know, for us, it's been a blessing, in disguise. It's obviously caused us a good 80% drop in downturn. So from a financial perspective, it's far less than delightful. But from a structural perspective, it's going to put us in a good spot moving forward. And I think you two guys are probably going to be in a similar boat because you're all people who are very, you're good operators who are going to wheel and deal with the times. And so it's a shame, like you alluded to ages ago, Stu, though, it takes 6 odd months to put a product to market. A lot of times now, there are lots of ideas what would be great right now. By the time we realistically test them, formulate them, flavour them, and get them out there, it's probably going to be a completely different, people are looking for something different again. But just holding on and go for the ride really has been for us, a pretty net positive minus the horrific financials, I would say.
Well, we've used this time for exactly that, for NPD, for product development, and so that when we come out the other end of this, we have those things, because it's not. People think you just turn a switch. Stu, you mentioned before, it can take up to 6 months, and it can take longer. So we're in the process of, okay, what are all the ducks in a row that we need to get in order to get this product from A to B to be market ready, and use this time wisely. So you're right, Will. It has sort of made people very cognizant of their time and making sure that they're using it wisely and using their resources wisely. So we definitely have, benefited from that kind of shock. I think a lot of businesses that have pivoted will have benefited from making sure they're using their time and finances a lot more cost effectively. But there is going to be a bit of a slowdown of products to market, I think, as a result of this. One thing that I am excited about, which I think will happen, and again, it takes a little bit to get these trends to stick, but I'm very hopeful that a lot of people will become a little bit more patriotic. I want to support Australian brands, Australian stores, Australian people instead of buying offshore. Certainly the drop in the US dollar or Australian dollar against the greenback will keep people buying, hopefully in Australia, a little bit more. But I just hope that when people are going to spend that money, they think about who they can spend it with here in Australia to support Australian families. Because I think that we all try to do our best by our Australian customers, and that's why we're based here and we look after our family and our friends. Hopefully people will do the same.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you two guys, just to touch on briefly, with the I guess the way that we've had to, not had to, but I think we've seen a need in the market for anti-stress products. We've seen a need in the market for adrenal products, for stress relief products. And so we've been talking about those and we've been advertising them. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, and it hasn't been for the most part, but in some cases, we're copping a little bit of flack for advertising that way. Some people are saying, you're taking advantage of the situation by advertising immunity products at this time or advertising anti-stress products at this time. What's your guys' take on that kind of feedback?
Oh, I can take this one. So, the evidence is there. At the end of the day, if you're efficaciously dosing your product, 300 milligrams of magnesium is shown to outperform the 5 top prescribed antidepressant medication. So forget adrenal switch for a minute. If you're just taking magnesium, you're going to be probably in a better position for the most part. Exercise outperforms antidepressant medication. It doesn't mean that there's not a position for medication at some point, but the point is that if you're doing these other things, which are the low-hanging fruit, good quality supplementation, exercise on a regular basis, fresh water and air, sunlight, those are the key things that sort of help. I don't go in with an attitude that my supplement is going to change your stress and your anxiety profoundly. I go in with the approach of use this in conjunction with these other smarter sort of lifestyle changes, and you're going to be better off for the long term. And it'll help. But the ingredients in there that are helping, and that's what we have to be mindful of from a therapeutic perspective or a TGA claims perspective. You can't say, hey, adrenal switch will lower your stress. Hey, adrenal switch will help you sleep better. What you can talk on is what magnesium can do, what ashwagandha can do, and hopefully that people will connect the dots, because it's a very tough area.
See, there was a comment made by one person in the Australian bodybuilding industry, and they said anybody who mentions the word immunity in their supplement marketing at the moment, should be shot or something like that. I don't know. I don't really know what it's motivated by. But I've definitely, on some of the posts that I've put up where I'm promoting ingredients, compounds that can assist with immunity or assist with lowering cortisol. I have seen some people saying things like, you know, you're taking advantage of the situation and you shouldn't be advertising that at this time. But I mean, my opinion is, when there's a problem out there, when people are suffering and struggling and we could do something to help them, it's the perfect time to advertise that sort of thing. It's the perfect time to market that sort of thing.
And people get the choice, right? They can choose whether to buy it or not. And that's the time. If they didn't know it was there, then they wouldn't know what choices they had. So rather than let people suffer in silence, why not at least let them know what choices that they can make? And hopefully, as I said, you know, the people that are selling them have good morals and ethics and will actually educate those clients and customers around the other things they can do as well to help their situation, not just supplements. Because, you know, as much as we all sell supplements, I don't think that every solution is in a bottle. I think that there's a lot we need to be doing in styles through stress management. Like I said, sunlight, vitamin D, as exercise has shown to reduce stress by 33 to 52%, depending on which study you look at. So, and that's cortisol levels. So there's a lot of, acutely you're going to get increases in cortisol from exercise, but chronically you're going to actually lower them. And it depends on the type of exercise. Marathons actually increase cortisol by 200% for chronic periods of time. So, you know, you're not going to tell someone right now who's highly stressed, go out and run a marathon, but you might tell them to do some short, high-intensity interval training 3 to 4 days a week to help minimize their levels of stress. So, I know, Stu, from your perspective, you've made mention over the last few weeks that not going to the gym has been quite stressful for you, because that is one of your anti-stress kind of processes, and you're not able to do that.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, the mental impact on the gyms being closed is having far more of an impact on me than the physical impact. You know, obviously I'm not as hard and firm. I might have lost a little bit of tone, but that's not really my concern. Like, I know that I can put that back on. I've been training for 15 years every day. For me, it's like this feeling of being totally lost. You know, I'm totally lost without the gym being open, and nothing that I seem to be able to do can fill that void.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's not because of the exercise per se, because you can probably train from home and do those exercises. It may well be the connection. It may well be the habit of going there. Like, that is your temple, that is your outlet. And by not being able to do that, you've got to almost create different habits that allow that same process to take place. And that's not easy for everybody either. So, I think that sometimes people are quick to judge and point the finger at people when things aren't going their way, or they're not, they feel like someone's trying to profiteer or benefit from a situation. I don't see that at all. I think if you're trying to sell some sort of light machine that you say cure COVID, then that is certainly profiteering. And that particular individual just got fined $25,000. So just be careful there, Stu, with your funny looking hat. There's kind of one end of the spectrum where we're saying, hey, these ingredients that are found in this product have been shown to help support immunity, lower stress, etc., or minimize the impact stress has on your body, versus this will cure something, this will fix every problem you have. I mean, those are light years apart, and one is certainly taking advantage and taking the piss, and the other one is actually helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's the same through these times or just regular times, really. When you look at marketing ploy, like, there are companies who do the wrong thing and take advantage, and we've all seen it, where you've seen the detox teas and all these microdose things that aren't actually, that have no, the marketing is so far disconnected from what the actual function is of what they're trying to promote. So, I think detox is one that's been flogged to death, and that was really big in our industry a few years ago, where we'd see there was always the teas and the different tonics they'd sell that would literally just be a sprinkling of green tea, and they say that's going to improve your detoxification system. And it's, anyone who knows anything at all knows that's a remarkably complex organism with thousands of enzymes involved. And then to say this tea will help. So I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, actually, they're sort of probably being fair enough in response to the amount of people who have played cowboys in the game for so long, and sort of taken advantage of people not knowing, just not knowing the science. And I think it's our job as three people with a platform like this to educate people enough to sort of, one, tell them what their goal is and how to achieve that the proper way. And thankfully, we're all sort of putting things to market which are sort of reflective of that. So I think it's very different when you see in these times or otherwise things, marketed or promoted to help with certain things, like in this case, immunity. Sure enough, it might seem like profiteering, but if you look at the data on your, glutamine, on lowering cortisol for gut inflammation, ergo, dendrite, and immune surveillance and all that sort of jazz, if you know it and it has claims, it's no longer claims. It's my favourite saying is, alternative medicine proven to work is just medicine. It's same with, in this particular case. I think we're all likely on the side of the fence. I think that they're trying to do the right thing. But playing devil's advocate, I'd say that there has been a lot of that though in the supplement industry, unfortunately, in the past, and we're lucky enough now to have an era of unrivaled transparency, really, where companies are really bringing stuff.
I think the struggle now is because there's been people doing damage to the reputation of the industry by doing that sort of thing, with these MLM companies and all sorts of stuff. We tend to get tarred with the same brush. So it frustrates me more than anything when I see, advertising for those sort of things and that style of advertising, because I know that people will categorize us in the same bunch. All right, well, I saw an MLM company who claimed to, have this detox shot that you take twice a day and you'll lose 23 kilos in 2 weeks. And then people say, oh, aren't you that, hey, Stewie, aren't you that guy that sells that shot that lets you lose 23 kilos in 2 weeks? Yeah. It's like, how do we separate ourselves from those? Because the general populace doesn't see the difference. And that's really the struggle that I think we face, is trying to show them the difference.
Oh, I agree. And a good example of this is keto space for us, because we were the first company in Australia to bring ketones to the market behind a US imported product, which was a MLM product. You had every electrician, accountant, and gardener and stay-at-home mum selling a ketone supplement, telling everyone it's the next big thing for fat loss. Now, the reason I got excited about ketones is because of the research around brain function and around lowering inflammation. So more of the health benefits. But in order to have a product sell in this market in Australia, you have to have some aspect of body compositional benefits to a degree. Even selling Vitality Switch, for me, I need to talk to people about the Bacillus coagulans increasing the digestibility of protein by 18%, which could give them a better chance of building more muscle, or else some of the bodybuilders won't take Vitality Switch.
People want to see physical changes, right?
Yeah. So we still have to talk on the benefits of keto or ketones for cosmetic or aesthetic benefits, weight loss, weight gain, whatever it might do. But we were tarred with that. But we had so many people say, oh, I tried those ketones and they didn't work for me. Hang on a minute. How many did you use? When did you use them? Why were you using them? And what brand were you using? And all those things matter, because, again, that particular MLM brand was proprietary blended. I have no idea how many ketones were in there. They were $10 a serve versus ours at $2.50 a serve. And if you don't get results of a product that costs you $10 and you need to take it maybe twice a day, $20 a day, you're going to be pretty angry. So we were just dealing with a lot of angry people saying, oh, ketones are rubbish. Well, you probably couldn't afford to take it correctly because you were paying 5 times the market value for that product because of the MLM system that was profiting the people at the top, not the people at the bottom. So it is frustrating, it's hard as a company to sort of stand for that kind of criticism of products and ingredients when they can work and will work if they're used to the right way, at the right dose, as Will pointed out. And
if you're expecting the right thing from them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Realistic expectations.
That's right, exactly. And it's like anything, some things will work quite quickly and you'll feel quite quickly, whereas other things can take time. A good argument for that is, again, we talk about gut health and we know the connection between gut health and brain function, or the gut-brain axis. We also know that close to 85% of the serotonin of the body is produced in the gut. So if we know that serotonin is a happy hormone, we know that most drugs that work on depression are SSRIs, or serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors. So the way that the kind of allopathic medicine or conventional medicine, as it will, is trying to treat depression is through keeping serotonin in the brain. Well, what if you could get a better gut function and actually make more of that serotonin in the first place? Wouldn't it make sense to use a product like Vitality Switch to support your gut health? And then you might see some good, lift in mood and reductions in depression, most likely, but it won't happen overnight. So, that's the thing. People need to do supplements are where you should start, and you should start where it's broken, okay? And more often than not, that's in the gut, or that's with the stress and anxiety, or it's with the lack of nourishment or nutrients from our food. So, starting with those things, I think, is where everyone should really start the supplement program.
Yeah, start away from the symptom, but the cause is usually way over here. Like you start looking at imbalances in neurochems. You're looking at your serotonin, your dopamine system, and then more often than not, it starts the gut lining, where a lot of that is produced. And then again, pretty much everything that we ingest now has a negative impact on top of the sort of environmental burden driving up stresses, which is going to further drive that gut inflammation, further disrupting that process, and you're going to end up with this really disjointed reward system. And then couple that with something like very abundant social media, which also hijacks our dopamine systems and gives us sort of a disproportionate reward center activation around things that don't necessarily actually give us any benefit in life. So there's a lot at play in that space. But you're right, very often what people go for, like the classic thing is energy drinks. People feel crappy, and so there's a huge market sector right now for Red Bull and energy drinks like that. Why are they tired? They're tired because they're feeling crappy, because their nutrition's crap, they're not exercising, their stresses are high, their sleep quality's down. All the environmental factors are why they reach for that energy drink, but all they know is they need the energy. So we're here to help tell them why. You're going to optimize, you're going to get that peak performance by optimizing the back end, not driving the front end. So yeah.
Well, that's even the way that I run my business, and my customers know this. People in the Illawarra area know that I'm different to what other people are doing in this space, and it's lifestyle first, supplements second.
Different.
What's that?
I said if they just saw you wearing that hat, they'd know you're a little bit different.
Yeah, but it's I don't always wear the hat when I say this, but I'll put it on anyway. Lifestyle first, supplements second.
Yeah, exactly. We're probably three advocates for that, and it's not often you get supplement owners or owners of supplement companies, formulators of supplement products that say, let's get your food and your lifestyle and your training and your stress management sorted in concert with the supplements you're using, not instead of using supplements to make up for those inadequacies that you have in your lifestyle. Problem is, it's the path of least resistance, right? So it's easier to go and grab a Red Bull than it is to look at your sleep, look at your gut health, look at your stress management, look at your meditation, look at these other mindful things that you need to be doing, because that's just a whole lot of hard work. So people want the path of least resistance. Give me some caffeine. Unfortunately, that becomes cyclical, and then they become dependent on that, and no longer is there a way of fixing it unless they really crash and burn, which is ultimately what will happen. And people will get to that point where they go, you know what, I'm absolutely screwed here. I need to go right back, and I need to find someone that will help me. And that's why I think it's going to be in business, helping fix the underlying problems, because they're always going to exist because people want the shortcut.
Yeah, good point, mate. Good point. Yeah, and that seems to be I say it's a niche, but really it's not. It's the tonic for the majority, really, isn't it? There's a few underlying factors that we see across the board at the moment, isn't it? Like you and I, Greg, we do seminars, and I'm sure you have too, Stu, in your decade in the game. And you'll rattle off the symptom pictures for all sorts of things, whether it be elevated cortisol, what have you. And everyone ticks it. Everyone in the room ticks those boxes. Everyone has some degree. There's no longer, what was normal is no one reads normal anymore. So, there's no such thing as the normal anymore in terms of clinical data for that. So, and that can be said for anything thyroid, and that flows onto other areas. So to have truly, well-balanced hormones, to have an optimally functioning thyroid, those sort of things we took for granted as a baseline are no longer the baseline. And, that's where I think products like what we've been putting out in the marketplace, when I put a fat burner in the market with metabolites that was thyroid focused 2 years ago, it was just a complete, it was a misnomer to discuss that outside of a pathology lab. But now, it's finally people are starting to become more aware because of the work we're doing, and it shows that slowly but surely our little niche market that is the supplement industry, which is a very small piece of a larger pie, is having an impact. We're finally informing people. We're finally getting a message out. And hopefully this whole, sort of linking it back to the whole current situation, hopefully this brings awareness from more and more people to the health space, which then leads them down to our part of the world. Hopefully we can spread the good stuff to look at, maybe the causational things more than the Band-Aid. So
yeah, 100%. And I think that, that's really the purpose of this podcast, isn't it? Really to help educate people, but also to entertain people, and and that's what we're here for. So, I think on that note, we might call it a podcast, and say thanks for listening, guys. We hope you've enjoyed everything we've had to say. Any last words for the Switch fans, Greg?
Well, thank you very much for all your support, and you guys too, Will and Stu. You guys have been champions for the brand ever since we started, and I know that you guys, in many ways we compete against each other out there in the marketplace, but at the same time, I think we have a lot of synergism, and that's why we're on here today. Help support each other, and I'll just say keep going into these Australian stores and supporting Australian brands, people. It makes a difference to us all.
Awesome. Thanks so much for chatting to me, guys, and thanks, Will, for having me on.
Pleasure. Thanks. Yes,
I don't know if this is your podcast or mine, mate, but
no one does anymore.
I think it's someone's. We're just on it. We're enjoying it.
It's a three-way host. It's so funny, isn't it? Because all three of us are used to being the host, so it's a really interesting little space we've got going on here. But thanks very much, gentlemen. I guess I'll wrap it up as the informal, albeit impractical host, and we'll call it an evening. So thanks, gentlemen, and we'll call it a night.
All right. See you guys.
See you guys.